Good morning. We're going to get started. It's wonderful seeing everyone here and everyone online. Thanks for making time to be a part of this. Hi, Jen. Hope everyone had a good weekend and enjoyed the beautiful weather. I know I did. I want to remind everyone who has class at 11 that we're very intentional about pausing at 10:50 to allow you to leave. So it's not so disruptive throughout the closing remarks and conversation. But if you could hold out till 10:50 and head to class, that'll be fine. I look forward to gathering at our forums every Monday. And so I'm delighted that you're all here, and we have some other guests and some new students that have joined us. It's really, I think it's becoming a special time for me, and I'm hopeful for you too. And we're so grateful for everyone who's joined us online from around the world. It's been pretty cool. We are very privileged to have our guest this morning, the Reverend Dr. Joe Modica. He's been at Eastern since 1993, so almost 30 years. We're gonna have to do something big next year to celebrate Joe. Big cake or something, yeah. So the wonderful thing about Eastern is that it is a beautiful and beautifully diverse and a theologically rich ecumenical community. And I've met so many people from different faith traditions, different denominational traditions, and I've benefited from all of that, challenged, and have grown in my own faith through that. Joe has been sort of shepherding our community for, like I said, almost 30 years. And his faithful spiritual leadership and witness is evident in our student body with our leadership. He has been a dear, dear friend to Tony and Peggy, and faithfully visits them and cares for them in a pastoral way. He's cared for many students that have been here in this community. I've personally benefited from his counsel and his care and his prayer. So we are very blessed to have Joe as a chaplain, as a professor, as a leader, and today as our speaker in this forum. And it's a particularly interesting conversation that he led us in a few years ago. So it seemed just fitting and appropriate to have him come back and share about holy envy, and I'll let him unpack what he means by that. So we're in for a real treat. Joe, thank you for making time to be with us. Look forward to hearing from you. Please join me in welcoming Joe Modica.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is good to be with you. Let me just say thank you to Robert and Jane for the invitation and for the good work that they're doing with the Campolo Center for Ministry. It is a labor of love for them as they continue to have the legacy of Dr. Tony Campolo and Peggy within our community and beyond. So thank you very much. I also wanted to just highlight something that I was involved in about 20 years ago when we commemorated a book when Dr. Campolo turned 65 years old, which is a little over 20 plus years ago. The book was entitled The Gospel with Extra Salt, The Gospel with Extra Salt. And when you think of the life of Dr. Campolo and Peggy and their witness to us, would you say that they are people of good news with a little extra salt, in a sense that they are able to enhance and to purify and to bring to fruition a lot of what is the message of Jesus, good news, the gospel. So thanks to Tony and Peggy for their friendship for nearly 30 years and being able to be a partner. And when I say that they are the patron saints of the university, I think I speak for many of us who have been here and are good about that. Also, too, thanks for my colleague here, Colleen, who I was so happy to see. We worked together for many, many years, and wonderful colleague, and grateful that you're here this morning. So you have a handout, and that just helps me stay on track. But I want you to feel free at a certain time. We'll have a Q&A, a question and answer. So The topic today is holy envy, and I'll get to what that suggests in a few minutes. But I want to open up with an illustration from Alan Gatz, who, when I was reading the New York Times book review back in the summer, he was getting ready to address middle schoolers about the Holocaust. And this is a quote from him. I was speaking to a gymnasium full of American middle schoolers once about a book I had written on the Holocaust, when a boy raised his hand and asked, was everyone from Nazi evil? I had been discussing the Holocaust for 45 minutes, and the whole time he heard Nazi Germany as Nazi, Germany, as though I was saying a place like Atlanta, Georgia. It's interesting, isn't it, about what we, in how we begin to think about the role of interfaith experiences at a distinctively Christian university. So that's what I'm most concerned about in this presentation this morning. What is the purpose of interfaith experiences at a distinctively Christian university? And that's what I've been involved in, and I'll speak about that over the last 8 years. So here's the 3 E's. This is not a sermon as much as maybe something way you can remember. I want to talk about education, experience, and edification. Education, experiences, and edification, talking about interfaith learning here at Eastern. Number one, education. I have been amazed in my work here as university chaplain, how many times I have experienced in conversations within and outside of our community, things that might be considered kind of unflattering to certain religious groups. And the question then you have to ask yourself is, why is that? Why is that? And I would really venture to say that it has a lot to do with a lack of education about what we understand different religious groups to be. We oftentimes don't even agree as Christians about what we understand our differences to be. But when we start to venture out, just say with Judaism or Islam, then you begin to realize how much do we really know? And maybe some of the caricatures, some of the statements we might be making, although we're not being malicious in our rhetoric, it could certainly be very painful. And I'll just give you an anecdote. I think we all know where we were, September 11, 2001. Some of us were not born yet, I understand. So you were just in your parents. But I will say this, one of the things that I learned quickly as the university chaplain is how little I knew about Islam and how many things were being said about a religion that I needed to know something about to have some sense of understanding. Well, let's think about this. Anti-Semitism has been on the rise in the US and worldwide, and that's just amazing in many ways. You can look at the statistics there. I gave it to you there of the hate crimes that have just gone up in recent years. And then the second part is how much do Americans know about the Holocaust? Just general basic educational knowledge, whether that be in middle school or high school. And as you can see, the Pew Research Center in January of 2020 did a survey and asked Americans, right, as far as you know, what does the Holocaust refer to? Well, 66% got it right, the annihilation of the Jews. My concern is the 34%, right, that didn't have a clue of what the Holocaust was, or sometimes termed Shoah, which means catastrophe in Hebrew. So we could say 66%, 2/3 got it, but what about a 1/3 of Americans? And how about the next question? In total, how many Jews were killed in the Holocaust? Well, 45% got it right. Approximately 6 million Jews. What about the 55% who didn't know how many Jews were killed or didn't even know proportionality or so forth? Now, we could always say that there's always ways to drill down in statistics, but my point being is what kind of education are we doing with regards to interfaith, right? What kinds of education, what kinds of things are we learning? So I would like to propose at Eastern, what we've been trying to do in the recent years is this thing called courageous pluralism, which means we are distinctively Christian, and we want to know what it means to follow Jesus. We want to know what discipleship looks like. We want to know faith, reason, and justice. We're not abandoning any of that, right? We want to dig deep into the Christian tradition, Roman Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox. We want to honor that. So we have a lot that we're doing here. But we live in a world that not everyone is Christian. We live in a world that is oftentimes divided not just by politics, but by religion and by other factors. We need, as disciples of Jesus Christ, not just to be mindful, but we need to create friendships, shared experiences with people of other faith. We call that courageous pluralism. Now, I know when you hear the word pluralism in some Christian circles, it's as if everything has broken loose, meaning, oh, he doesn't believe anything. He's a pluralistic kind of person. So I want to diffuse that a little bit to realize that it's good to be pluralistic. I would say Jesus modeled courageous pluralism in his own ministry. We'll get to what it means. I think sometimes people mistake it for relativism. They think that when you say pluralism means nothing matters, everybody believes the same thing anyway. But look at the definition of relativism that I have here. It's kind of a generic one. All worldviews and religious systems are in the end equally valid and must be affirmed as legitimate and non-critiquable. Have you heard that definition before? Right, cultural relativism. You have your truth, I have my truth. You have your religion, and it's all the same at the end. So why even talk, why even worry about that? You've heard that before. So I'm not necessarily saying something you haven't heard before. What I'm advocating is something that Diana Eck from Harvard University, she says, we need pluralism in our culture to be able to be people of integrity, people of moral courage. This is what she says. Pluralism takes the reality of difference at its starting point. The challenge of pluralism, listen to this now, is not to obliterate or erase difference, but rather to discover ways of living, connecting, relating, arguing, and disagreeing in a society of differences. Wow, that would feel a lot different than what I'm seeing on the television, on the radio, sometimes even in the print media. You see, if you look on the backside of your sheet there, number one, pluralism is not diversity alone, but here it is, friends, but the energetic engagement with diversity. And secondly, pluralism is not just tolerance, which is a word I think originally really meant something really important, but over the years has kind of deteriorated, but rather active seeking of understanding across lines of difference. The worst thing we can do, in my opinion, somebody from a religious tradition say, well, I'll just tolerate you. You may not say it that way, but if we have that kind of indifference, yes, we're tolerating, but we're not learning, we're not growing, we're not seeking education. And I think at a Christian university, so I'm speaking as an insider here, it would be wonderful that we do more comparative religions, we do more people of different faiths coming to our campus to engage us, to talk with us, to develop friendships of difference, which I think would be really important. All right, that was the first E, education. We're an academic institution, so education should be right up there. Reading, writing, thinking, conferences, and so forth. The next one is experience. You don't have to raise your hand, but I wonder how many of our students have had a significant friendship of a person of another religion, have even known somebody. I mean, what I mean by known, meaning really knew somebody of a different religion. I wonder what percentage would that be? Would that be half of our student body would know that? Would it be a third? I wonder sometimes, and I have met students that have never met another person of a different faith until they came to Eastern. Now that would be that they're 18 years old and they basically have lived a good life. And I'm not saying that anything wrong with it. I'm just saying it's mal-informed, right? You're not fully formed. So we have at the university, one way to address this, and it's not the only way, of course, we have a Jewish-Christian interfaith exchange that is entering its 8th year, called the Chamberlain Interfaith Fellowship. I won't go through all the details of how it began, but it's a really wonderful fellowship. Sarah Kimmel is in our 8th cohort. You didn't know your name was going to be on a handout, did you? You were probably worried about I see my name, he's gonna say something about me. A grade point average. No, I'm not, no, you're doing really well. You're doing really well. You won an award at Complicated. Yeah, all right. So that's public knowledge, friends. I'm not unearthing anything there. So Sarah Kimmel, right? Sarah Kimmel is a part of cohort 8. Now, basically, what are we doing here? We're trying to have a relationship, a Christian university with a Reform temple right outside of Boston, Massachusetts, called Temple Bet Shalom. It's been a wonderful relationship. I've been grateful. I've been privileged to be part of that. And I put the website link on there so you can take a look at what we're doing and what we're trying to do. Also, here's a save the date where we're going to have a person from the Muslim faith on campus in February. This is something that I'm working with Dr. Tara Stopper. Some of you know Dr. Stopper from psychology. She is also committed to courageous pluralism. So February 9th and 10th in 2023, we have an organization coming on campus, Neighborly Faith, both graduates from Wheaton College, and they are hosting, we're gonna have a Christian pastor and an imam, a Muslim cleric, who are dear friends, and they're going to show us how to be friends, how to model healthy interfaith relationships from the Muslim tradition. Okay, isn't that interesting? Now, why are we doing this? Because it's essential. This is not something tangential. It's essential to what it means to be a Christian university, in my opinion. You want to follow Jesus? Please do. That's what we're committed to. But Jesus wants us to follow in the world in which we live and how we connect all those relationships. Okay, the last E, and then we could take a Q, we'll take some questions and so forth. The last E is edification, right? We want to talk about education, some experiences. We want to get students to have the experience. It's nice to talk about interfaith, but you got to meet the people who are different than us and build relationship. And then the last one is edification. This is where the title of my talk comes from, Holy Envy, Holy Envy. Krista Stendall was a New Testament scholar who taught for many years at Harvard University Divinity School. He died in 2008. For those of you in biblical studies, you will know Krista Stendall because he wrote an article in the late 60s that kind of promoted and kind of launched what we might call the new perspective on Paul. But don't worry about that right now. What he also did, in light of being a New Testament scholar, he developed 3 rules of religious understanding. These are called the Stendall Rules, right? And you know what he did? He did it in a conversation with the Mormon church, right? This was actually done, he was asked to go out to Utah and have conversations with Mormon folk, and we know about Mormon religion and so forth. And this is the 3 rules he said. And I wrote them down because you need to memorize them. No, you don't need to memorize them, but you know, they're important rules. They're simple, but they're so meaningful. Number 1, when you are trying to understand another religion, you should ask the adherents of that religion and not its enemies. Wow, how novel. That means if you have something you want to know about another religion, you don't go to someone who's angry at that religion or has maybe a bias towards that religion, or is an ex. I'm an ex blank, right? You've heard that language. I'm an ex. No, go find someone in that religious grouping and ask them a question, right? Number 2, don't compare your don't compare your best to their worst. Don't compare your best to their worst. Because as you know, one thing all religions have are really good things and really bad things that have happened in the religious tradition. So don't compare your best to their worst. That's so easy. And isn't that the kind of human tendency? We want to kind of contrast and show how much better we are, or how much more truthful we are in all things. Better to not compare your best to their worst. And then lastly, this is what Stendhal is known for in some ways with regards to interreligious conversation. Leave room for holy envy. He coined the phrase holy envy. We know what envy is, something We're attracted to something we want to gain, something we want to know more of. We're envious of something or someone. Holy, however, the adjective makes it different. By this, Stendall meant that you should be willing to recognize elements in other religious traditions or faith that you admire and wish could in some way be reflected in your own religious tradition or faith. I'll tell you, to be honest with you, friends, having now been in this interfaith relationship with Temple Bet Shalom, there are things when I go to the Shabbat service on the ground at Temple Bet Shalom every fall with students. There are some things I'm really envious about, that I really enjoy, that in my own church tradition is not currently present. Jewish students who spend their time in the spring semesters during the 8 years at Eastern tell us what they really appreciate about Christianity. You should listen to when Jewish students tell us something about what they admire. I'll tell you one quick thing. What they admire is the spontaneity of prayer, that our students can be so sincere, close their eyes and pray right to God. Where in Reform Judaism, I'm not saying that can happen, but that's generally not the posture, right, for certain services. So we learn from each other. That's called holy envy. And when we have holy envy, I believe that we can grow in our own faith tradition. So it's not in exclusion, but rather it can also be part of our faith tradition. So I think we need to know the difference between tolerance and appreciation. I find often that people are willing to tolerate other religions, and I'm finding that that's not a good posture at all for Christians, because my friend Scott McKnight wrote The Difference Between Tolerance and Appreciation. Listen to this quote. Tolerance accepts without personal responsibility. Appreciation understands with a commitment to others. Tolerance leads to indifference. Appreciation to concrete acts of relationship. Ultimately, tolerance emerges from utility, appreciation from love. Friends, we need to appreciate other religions. It doesn't mean we're looking to be converted to a religion. We're not looking to necessarily convert them. What I'm saying is we need to be in shared friendships and shared learning with other religions. And so we really want to appreciate, and that's where holy envy comes out of, a deep appreciation. Lastly, Synagogue and Necklacia. I also am on the board of directors at St. Joseph's University for their Institute for Jewish Catholic Relations. So I was asked to serve on the board, myself and about 25 other people, mostly Christians and Jews together. St. Joseph's University is a university about 25 minutes away from us, Catholic in the Jesuit tradition. And they are doing some wonderful work of bringing together both religions in ways that, for education, but also for issues of justice and support in the world. They commissioned a sculpture from Joshua Kaufman. He is a local Philadelphia artist. So if you want to see the actual sculpture, I don't have the way to show it to you, but it's right in front of the Institute for Jewish Catholic Relations. It's called Synagogue, which means synagogue, and Ecclesia, which means church. And what it does is it puts both of those as kind of female figures that prior to this sculpture, from the 13th century on, it always had the Ecclesia, in a sense, at a higher level than the synagogue. It had the synagogue with a blindfold, where the Ecclesia had the beautiful crown. It was really a contrast of one replacing the other. I'll just leave it as that. What we see here in this sculpture is both women are wearing crowns. One's holding a Torah, one's holding a Bible, and they're looking at each other. They're looking at each other with appreciation. There are differences. I'm not blurring the differences, but the model of Synagogue and Necklacia in our time by Joshua Kaufman is wonderful. It's a deep appreciation for each other. Remember, especially with Judaism, Judaism is our mother. We got to know who our mother is, and we got to appreciate our mother. We're different than our mother, We have certainly moved on and we make claims about Jesus very different, but Judaism is our mother. Last but not least, and I think I'm coming up to my time here, the book that I would highly recommend, but also you get the article by the author who, in a more condensed version, is Barbara Brown Taylor, who's a wonderful author, Episcopal priest, professor, speaker, writer. Anything she writes, I have read. I mean, she's really, really good. She wrote a book based on Stendall's principle. It's called Holy Envy, Finding God in the Faith of Others. It talks about her teaching Religion 101 at Piedmont College in Georgia. And each chapter is one of the religions she had to teach, right? Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And then at the end, what she learned about that. And I think the article that everyone got will also help you to know that a little bit. So I guess in conclusion then, we are a distinctly Christian university that follows Jesus, that believes that Jesus is the Son of God, the Redeemer of the world. We claim that. God raised Jesus from the dead, and because of that, everything changed in time and space. We believe that wholeheartedly, and we want to continue to raise that as a good news for everyone and every situation. And yet we're called, and I say and yet, I mean, we're called in a world of very different religions and views, and we are called to love our neighbor as ourselves and to learn from our neighbor. You know, loving your neighbor is learning from your neighbor too. It's not simply, oh, I picked up the trash can for them. You want to learn from your neighbor. And I think this model of courageous pluralism is really a good model to be able to see how we can be faithful to the call of the gospel in our lives during this time. Okay, I think it's about 10:30. Is that? Oh, thank you.